If you've looked at your worship folder, you'll see the title of the sermon is LOL, Leaving Our Legacy. And now that we have emoticons, we no longer need to use that phrase LOL when we're typing or texting to our friends, but it's a humorous phrase, meaning let's just, this isn't serious, just kidding. Well, far from it. This morning on Father's Day, this is really what I wanted to think about. What are we leaving behind? And that's our legacy. So this is not, it might be a humorous title, you might think that's dumb, but oh well, I got to choose it. So, leaving our legacy, LOL, it just seemed to work for me. If it doesn't work for you, talk to me later. Have you ever thought about what people might think about you after you're gone? I don't know why, but I think about that occasionally. I think about my grandparents in particular, and I'll be speaking about them in a little bit, but when my second daughter was 2 and sitting in the back seat, unsecured because we had the oldest car then, and it didn't have air, and it was, well, that's another story, and it's a really good one. I'll tell you later if you want to hear it. Anyway, she's 2 years old, sitting in the back seat, and all of a sudden she piped up. She had a really high voice, channeling Minnie Mouse, if you will. "Mommy, what's a legacy?" And I said, "Wow, she's brilliant. What a kid." I thought, oh my goodness. And I started to try to explain legacy, and then I realized that on the radio is playing that Dan Fogelberg song, Leader of the Band. It's a wonderful song. If you want to know more about it later, grab one of the Deep in the Word devotionals. There's a little bit more information about it. It's a fabulous song. But the line that had caught her little 2-year-old ears was, "My life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man. I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band." And he had written that song about his father, who was a band teacher. Yes, Roger, a band teacher. And I know Roger can tell you a lot more about this song. So it kind of got me thinking about what's going on with this song and what's going on with legacy. And so when I started thinking about this message, I Googled legacy, and what I found online was obituary notices, genealogy software, and high-end furniture. That legacy, that's not really what I thought it was. So take your pick. What? A Subaru. I didn't think about that either. Cars. Cars and sports are usually not on my list, on my radar. When somebody dies, we mourn. We grieve for them. Our family started this process a month ago on Mother's Day, and last week Joanna was absent from our family here because she and her sisters took their mom up north because it was the 3rd anniversary of their dad's passing. And so this is just something we do as people, and the reason for these wonderful things are so that we have a focal point, a place to go and think about people that we still miss. But what happens after somebody's been gone for 5 years, after they've been gone for 10 years, for 50 years? Who knows? Who cares what's going on with them? Several years ago, my sisters and I took our mother on a graveyard tour of Kansas, which might sound a little bizarre to you, but we had a wonderful time. It was great. We visited all the cemeteries where all of her ancestors that she knew of were buried. And it was fun. We got to read old and think, I didn't know I had a great uncle named Thaddeus McCracken, Thaddeus Ulysses McCracken. Oh, what a great name. He would have won that Amazon gift card this morning. Anyway, it wasn't just going to the cemeteries, it was thinking about the lives who've gone before. Who were they as people? They're not just a name chiseled on a piece of stone. They were somebody who mattered, somebody who cared. What did they leave behind? When Steve and I visited Scotland in the parks, I love this. They have benches with plaques on them with people's names. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. After I'm gone, I'd like to have somebody sitting on me. At least I'd be useful. And somebody would say, I'm so glad Denise left this bench here to sit on in the shade. I thought that was a little more useful than a gravestone that, some people might not ever go. The reason that Jews put rocks on gravestones is so somebody will know that that stone has been visited, that somebody's been by to visit that family. I loved my grandparents. I did. We never lived near them. We were always hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from where they lived. And they've been gone for several years now. So what did they leave behind? What kind of a legacy did they leave me? Did they leave my sisters and my brothers? Not much of material belongings. I have one piece of legacy furniture, and it's not high-end furniture. Well, maybe it was, I don't know. It's a buffet, and it was my great-grandparents when they got married in 1896. And it's precious to me. I never got to know them, but it's special just because of who it used to belong to. I have my grandma's silver plate, and it still has the price tag that came in the box because she was a saver. She kept everything, didn't she? I have little tiny paintings that my grandfather made. He was very frugal. He would go to the hardware store and get tile samples, the little 2 by 3 inch pieces of tiles with the holes punched in them. And he would paint them white, and then he would paint little tiny seams on those and use them for luggage tags and sell them at craft fairs. I still have some of those. I have my other grandfather's harmonica and a set of dominoes. He made the little wooden box that the dominoes came in. So why am I telling you about these things? These things are precious to me. I wouldn't give them up. I don't know if any of my kids are ever going to want them, but they did not shape who I am as a person, even though I treasure them and I know exactly where they all are, which is kind of unusual for me. And I take them out every once in a while and look at them, but they didn't make Denise who she is. They didn't have anything to do with my character development or my skill set or anything like that. Who they were as men and women shaped me, meant something to me. My earliest memories of my grandparents are those of hospitality and kindness. I cannot remember ever being in their presence when I did not feel important. And I didn't get to see them often enough. I remember worshiping in their churches. And when I was a child, we went to a different tribe than what they did. And they were both Quaker preachers. And I don't remember anything at all about their preaching. I couldn't tell you if they were good preachers or bad preachers. I couldn't tell you that. What I do remember is that they smiled a lot. And they enjoyed being there. As a child, I could tell that they genuinely enjoyed being in church. They wanted to be there. So the legacy they gave me was to love the church. As adults, Steve and I traveled to Oklahoma and visited my grandpa and grandma Seller, my dad's folks, long after Grandpa had retired from the pastorate for the 3rd or 4th time. On a Sunday morning, we traveled miles into the country, and at the end of a dirt road, there was this little tiny church in northeastern Oklahoma. The church looked like a picture postcard, and we actually found a photo of it online. No plumbing, no air conditioning. My grandparents had committed themselves to the nurturing care of this tiny congregation for years after they were officially retired. And the Sunday that we were there, Steve, our infant daughter, and me, and my grandparents, there were a total of 9 people in that congregation. You do the math and you can figure out that 5 of us came in one car. The legacy that they gave me was to care for God's kingdom. Numbers do not matter, but people do. As Quakers, my grandparents did not believe in baptism, water baptism. That's not just part of their belief system. I don't understand it, but that's who they are, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. In his 80s, when my grandpa Matt came to live with my mother, he decided that he needed to be baptized. My uncles came from Missouri and Georgia, and I traveled from Oklahoma to Tempe to witness it. My grandpa glowed when he asked anyone who was around if they wanted to know why he had decided, after being a pastor for years and years and years, why he had decided now to get baptized. And he pointed them to the 3rd chapter of Matthew, and he said, if Jesus needed to be baptized, then I guess I do too. The legacy that he gave me was the flexibility in his beliefs. He was never too old to quit studying and learning from God. The legacy from my father is the shape of my nose and the tendency to enjoy bad jokes. And he's so happy we have this picture up there. He taught me to love fun and send bad email jokes. And I turned around to look at him during that little video clip this morning because that was perfect for you. Puns. He says he's a very punny guy. The legacy I got from my mother is very different. She had the challenge of raising and training me. She taught me how to separate eggs using the eggshell, how to make a bed using hospital corners, and how to knit. She also taught me that whenever I got discouraged or frustrated, whatever was happening was building a super rich spirit, and man, how I hated to hear that phrase. You can tell how much I love my family, and I have a strong legacy from them. What about those of us who did not have positive influences in their lives? I could tell you many harsh examples of harmful environments that have given rise to beautiful harvests, but I'm just going to tell you one. When Catherine was in 4th grade, she brought home her new bestest friend, and we grew to love this little girl, and they wanted to play together every day. She always wanted to go to her house, and she always wanted to come to Catherine's house. But for some reason, it seemed like she was never allowed permission to come to our house to play. And over time, we realized that it wasn't safe for Catherine to go to her house to play. It was a dreadful, dreadful place for her to go. And it wasn't a wholesome environment for children. And this little girl had a difficult time. When she was in 6th grade, I believe, her mother shipped her off to her dad's house in Oregon, and we were very sad. And she came back after just a few weeks because Dad did a paternity test, DNA, and decided she wasn't his. So she came back to this place that was basically a meth house. And so this little girl had none of the advantages of childhood, but all of the responsibilities of adulthood for this house full of adults. She earned a president's scholarship to ASU. She earned her college degree. She's now working full-time for the University of Phoenix, is married and has a healthy little baby girl. Wonderful, wonderful. What happened? She had no positive father in her life, did she? What legacy did she have? I believe with all my heart that the caravan teachers and the families who invested in her life, that their prayers made a big difference in this little girl's life. Each one of us has more influence on the people around us than we could ever imagine. Last night at our I Help dinner, I was speaking with Howard, and he gave me permission to share a part of his story. He's one of the trustees now for our Interfaith Homeless Emergency Lodging Program. This is one of the things that you as a congregation support here on our facility. And he said he kind of knew the church, he knew God, but his first night at I Help, and you know, to be in I Help, you have to be homeless. It's not a desirable place to be. His first night there at one of the other churches in Chandler, somebody was talking to him about his life and offered to pray with him. And so at that point, Howard had a choice. He said, I decided that God was worth it. I was going to dig in. And now he's almost like a preacher counselor in I Help. And I Help is a temporary program. But I said, look at this congregation you have. You're preaching. He says, I'm not a preacher. I can't get up in front of people. And I said, I don't care where you're standing. What you're doing by praying with people and encouraging them is making a difference in people's lives. So by being in a really cruddy place, homelessness, Howard is making a difference in all the lives of the people around him. We are surrounded by other people's legacies, no matter where we are, where we're walking, where we work, where we go. Our scripture this morning is from a letter to the Hebrews, and these people were not a congregation. They were scattered all throughout the known world. It tells us that we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And this, in case you're wondering, this was a Thanksgiving dinner one year. And it's not easy to get everybody in one place, but somehow we did it, and everybody's kind of smiling. We're always surrounded by somebody's always watching. The entire 11th chapter of Hebrews is like a who's who for the Bible. I call it the shouting chapter because if you read it, because of the rhetoric, because of the repetition, because of the rhythm of this chapter, it's just inspiring. It's just inspirational. You can't help but get blessed, as some of the old-timey Nazarenes would have said. Start shouting and waving your hanky. Remember when they used to whoop and holler in church? No, I'm not going to. You're okay. But chapter 12 begins with, most of your translations say, therefore. That means you need to go back to chapter 11 and read what's happening before we read chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, which is our scripture for this morning. So please rise as we read this together. We have all these from chapter 11, all these great people around us as examples. Their lives tell us what faith means. So we, too, should run the race that is before us and never quit. We should remove from our lives anything that would slow us down and the sin that so often makes us fall. May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. You may be seated. The witnesses that the writer to Hebrews is talking about is that impressive long list of men and women in Hebrews chapter 11. They are witnesses, and this is what Howard said. He kept saying, I'm not a preacher, I'm just giving witness. I said, yes, you are. These men and women in chapter 11 of Hebrews are witnesses because they have already endured. They've been there, they've done that. They've come through. They have already had to go through the suffering, the trials, the challenges, just because they belong to God. They are witnesses to the faithfulness of God in their lives, their triumphant survival. Witness to us that God brought them through the difficulties. They are witnesses to us that we are not alone. Therefore, since you're surrounded, I don't know how many of you have ever run a race. But if it's a race like Pat's Run or the marathon or the half marathon or even a 5K, you're not the only person in one lane. There's a huge crowd of people. And I'm telling you, it's a lot more empowering to run a race that way when you're surrounded by people. You have to be careful that you don't trip on their feet. But nobody's watching you. You're all together. You're all going the same direction. It's a powerful feeling. This is what the writer to Hebrews is talking about. We're in it together. We're surrounded. You're not alone. So we're in the midst of men and women who have experienced tragedies and heart-shattering decisions. And they belong to the family of God because they had faith. Say it with me. Because they had faith. That is the thread that holds our story together, faith. This is our legacy. The men and women who have gone before us have given us their testimony of faith. They are were completely ordinary people. They were completely transformed by faith because, this is the important part, because they chose to believe. It's a choice, because they chose to believe in God through their challenges, and because of that, they are our witnesses. We can choose to be a part of that same legacy. Just because they went before and we're surrounded by them does not mean that we're not part of that. Do you understand? We join right in if we choose. The race that the writer of Hebrews is talking about is more than just making it to heaven. There is so much more to the journey of life than just that. We are responsible for changing the world around us by just living it day by day. If just getting to heaven were the point of it all, then we would just have a heavenly appointment as soon as we accepted Jesus as our Savior and said yes to God, and sit back on our heavenly recliners and wait for that moment. We receive our legacy from the saints that are around us, that surround us, but both the ones who have gone before us by their stories and influence, and the ones that we work and live with both today and tomorrow, we pass on or transmit our legacy by becoming used by God. So we receive it, and then we live it and we transmit it. We pass it on by living what God puts in front of us. A few years ago, an older friend confided in me that her daughter was going through a really difficult time. Her husband was an atheist and would not allow her to take her children to church. And it was causing my friend, this was her only child, was causing her tremendous grief and difficulty, and as well as the daughter. And she asked if I would do something. I went, okay. So I called her up and we met at Starbucks and had a nice evening, and I listened, did a lot of listening. And at the end of a couple of hours, we parted ways, and I didn't hear from her for a long time. And I thought, well, you know, I'm not a magician, not a miracle worker. About 2 years later, I got a thank you note from her. And she said, I just want to tell you how much that meant to me. And for some reason now, I get to take my boys to church, and I'm back in church, and they're in the youth group, and I just want to thank you for everything you did. And I went, because I didn't do anything. I listened. I was just there. We never know. You never know what little things you do are making a difference. The little thing that you think is in front of you might be something really big to somebody else. We are influential when we allow God to move through us. Sometimes difficult to know what it really is that God is asking us to do. That's usually the hardest part of obedience. At least it is for me. I like to see a roadmap. I want to know where I'm going, and I want to see where the green line goes. A wise woman told me once when I was saying, but how do I know what to do? She said, just do what's in front of you. I said, well, that's too easy. But it's true. Do what God puts in front of you. Eugene Peterson, a Presbyterian pastor who's one of my favorite writers, the translator of the Message, said, he always prays before he enters a room because he said, God's already there in front of me. I'm just coming inside. I'm just entering the room. I'm just entering the conversation that's already going on. And when we think of it that way, it takes some of the pressure off. We don't have to have a plan. We don't have to arrange everything or manipulate the environment or fix everything around us. We just enter into what God's doing in that situation already. Legacy. What you leave behind. What legacy do you hope to leave? We want to counteract the negative influence of our society, of the culture, of all of and that's what Howard told me last night. He said, I was just full of negativity, and when that man prayed with me, I realized that, and I knew I could change that with God's help in my life. We want to counteract the negativity. I mean, it's easy to be negative. It's pretty easy, let me tell you. We're surrounded by it every day. We want to leave the legacy of ourselves, of who we are. When I think of the legacy that my grandparents left to me, I think of how they loved me, and that's one of the legacies I want to leave behind. I do. I want my grandchildren and my children, yeah, I like them too. I want them to know that I loved them unconditionally. I wasn't always good at it, but I hope the love comes through. We want to leave the legacy of the love that we hold for God and for God's people. We want to leave the legacy of the strength that God can give to those who follow behind us. We want to leave the legacy for God to hold up our children and to sustain them as they continue to build their own families, and that they will be strong in influencing their families and their communities. The good thing, the powerful thing, the best thing is that that's God's plan for us. And that's what the writer of Hebrews is saying. Part of the legacy that we have is this vivid playbook that we can use to read and encourage and grow and prosper in God's plan for our lives. Hebrews 11 gives us that powerful, inspirational story of faith, those snapshots, those faith snapshots. And this is what the writer of Hebrews is talking about in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. We have all these people around us as examples. Their lives tell us what faith means, what they did in difficult situations. So we too, we can, should run the race that is before us and never quit. We should remove from our lives everything that would slow us down and the sin that so often makes us fall. Dan Fogelberg may have been writing a love song to his father, but he got it right when he said, "I'm just a living legacy." That was the best way that he could be a tribute to what his father meant to him. The very best way, by living his life so that he would imitate the positive, strong things that he saw in his father, to imitate him and live a life that reflects his father's values. That is exactly what the writer of Hebrews is talking about when he tells us to look at everyone, those witnesses, that great crowd, those examples of those who have gone before us, and imitate their lives, the choices that they made. This morning, on Father's Day, we have a tremendous opportunity to contemplate the possibilities in front of us. Not just fathers, of course, but the fatherhood that nurtures and encourages and restores the legacy that we want to leave behind, to make a difference. As a fitting Father's Day celebration, Christopher and Elizabeth Burns have brought their son, Stephen Axel Burns, to worship this morning for the purpose of formally offering his life and theirs to God in service. In the Church of the Nazarene, we recognize the ceremony of personal dedication, and we invite them and their family to come forward at this time. They're being shy. I've never seen that before. And he was asleep. Then there were brought unto him, unto Jesus, little children, that he should put his hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, "Suffer little children, and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." In presenting this child for dedication, you signify not only your faith in the Christian religion, but also your desire that Stephen may early know and follow the will of God, may live and die a Christian, and come unto everlasting blessedness. In order to attain this holy end, it will be your duty as parents to teach him early the fear of the Lord, to watch over his education that he not be led astray, to direct his youthful mind to the Holy Scriptures, and his feet to the sanctuary, to restrain him from evil associates and habits, and, as much as in you lies, to bring him up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Will you endeavor to do so by the help of God? If so, answer, "I will." I now ask you, the congregation, will you commit yourself as the body of Christ to support and encourage these parents as they endeavor to fulfill their responsibilities to this child and to assist Stephen by nurturing his growth towards spiritual maturity? If so, answer, "We will." Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we do here and now dedicate Stephen Axel Burns in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. We humbly pray that you will take take this child into your loving care. Abundantly enrich him with your heavenly grace. Bring him safely through the perils of childhood. Deliver him from the temptations of youth. Lead him to a personal knowledge of Christ as Savior, and help him to grow in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man, and to persevere until the end. Uphold the parents with loving care, that with wise counsel and holy example they may faithfully take care of their responsibilities both to this child and to you. In the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The problem with a baby that's been sleeping. Thank you, family.